আমাদেরই বসুন্ধরা, তাহার মাঝে আছে দেশ এক, সকল দেশের সেরা। ও সে স্বপ্ন দিয়ে তৈরি সে দেশ, স্মৃতি দিয়ে ঘেরা। এমন দেশটি কোথাও খুঁজে পাবে না কো তুমি, সকল দেশের রানী সেজে আমার জন্মভূমি, সে যে আমার জন্মভূমি, সে যে আমার জন্মভূমি, সে যে আমার জন্মভূমি।
Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Unfinished Memoirs. Today's episode is a very special episode today because December is our victory month. So I wanted to take a moment from everyone here at the Unfinished Memoirs and Mukti online channel BD to say a big thank you and take a moment to respect all of our freedom fighters who fought for our country and sacrificed their lives for today's generation. Obviously, it's our victory month, and as we celebrate Victory Day on the 16th of December, we remember their bravery and faith in preserving and enriching our Bangladeshi heritage, as well as showing the rest of the world what it means to really fight for your life and fight for your history as well as your future. So I'm very proud to have actually met many freedom fighters in my career. Many of them were very young as well. They were my age when they were fighting, or they were protesting, or they were being activists. And I really believe that their examples in our history are a great testament to what we can do today. So I hope that we continue to learn the lessons that they've taught us, and I hope that our show does their courage justice. So I want to say a big thank you to everyone who's joined us today, and I wanted to say a big thank you to you for watching, and please remember to follow, comment and subscribe to both our Facebook channel and our YouTube channel. So the Unfinished Memoirs is showcased by Mukti online channel BD. It's produced by Bongobondhuo Sangskritik Jote London branch. I want to say a big thank you to our coordinator Abdul Aziz Tokib, as well as our technical guidance, support and coordinator Nazrul Islam Okib, they're both always doing the most in helping us elevate this show, improve this show, and just make it as 100% as it can be. So like I said, please do remember to like, share, comment, and as I said, we're broadcasting both on Facebook and YouTube, so there's both streams that you can use. And a big thank you again to Mukti Online BD. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our guest for today. We have a new guest, Ehsan, as well as a returning guest, Kazim Maknoun. You will have seen him many times in our episode. So I want to say a big thank you to Mahmoud for stepping in last minute. As well as we have a senior guest joining us later on. She's an Oxford educated teacher, Shubhi Akhtar. She's one of my, she's a cousin of mine, but she's also a dear best friend of mine. We've known each other since the first day, and she's an incredible teacher. She teaches secondary school students, so it'll be really exciting to have her insights in teaching Bangladesh children, as well as like multicultural. She teaches a lot of multicultural students. So she'll be joining us later on in the show. So I want to say a big thank you to everyone who's joined so far, as well as Shukti, who'll be joining us later on. If you haven't watched this show before, essentially what it is that our younger talents, Ehsan and Mahnoun, will be reading from the Unfinished Memoirs, which is a very historical document by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. It's his personal diary where he speaks of every event in his life, essentially, from the first days of him in school up until the 1950s. So he wrote it while he was in jail. And every 2 weeks we have young talents read a passage of the book, and then they will answer we have an incredible discussion about the passage, and it's really insightful and really thoughtful conversations. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Ehsan. Hi Ehsan, how are you? Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining very much. And I want to say a big thank you to Ehsan for being so engaging from the very beginning. He is new, but he's been very engaged, as I said, and very just very enthusiastic. So I want to say a big thank you. And Ehsan, when you're ready, please read your passage.
But now they seem to be deliberately staying away from a group of them, even complying to us. We have instruction from above not to cooperate with him. It also seemed that the detective branch had become very active. It was clear to us so that it was essential to ensure communal harmony in Pakistan from the nation. Future if refugees started to flood in the nation would be in dire straits, something that should have been obvious to anyone who had given thought to the situation. It would, of course, appear different from those who approach politics with a closed mind. There were hundreds of thousands of Muslims still living in the West Bengal, Bihar, Assam, and the other states of India whose contribution was by no means less significant than those of us involved in the movement from Pakistan. We believe that we should ensure harmony, keeping the lot in mind. The truth was the East Pakistani Muslim had accepted Mr. Chaudhry's advice on the matter. As a result, Hindus not to leave the country. I went to many places to work for the communal harmony. I know of many incidents that progressive-minded Hindu brothers from the West Bengal failed to ensure communal harmony there. From the time to time, there were outbreaks of violence in the state, and homes and properties of the innocent Muslims were ransacked and destroyed in many places. At this point of time, food security was recorded in many places in Patriarchal people in Faridpur, Comilla, and Dhaka. Districts were facing a calamity due to acute shortage of food grain. The government now introduced the cordon system. This meant that there was to be no movement of food from one district to another. People of Dhaka and Faridpur used to work as day laborers to harvest rice in the fields of Khulna and Barishul. They would reap the harvest and take it to homes. There, in return, they would get a share of the harvest. They were called dhows. Thousands of them would come in boats. When they went back, they would take their share of rice in their boats to their homes. This was how the dhows of Camilla would go to Sylhet, for instance. Almost all of them were very poor and day laborers that would leave their home for 2 months at a stretch. When leaving, would leave their homes for 2 months at a stretch. Laborers, they would when leaving, they would take a loan from moneylenders so that they could leave behind money for their families' daily expenses. On their return, they would repay the loans. They would also have to pay a share to the people whose boats they had used. When dhows went to harvest paddy, no one obstructed them since they were indispensable. This was because all the paddy streams ripen at about the same time and have to harvest quickly. It is difficult to get so many in for centuries. Thousands and thousands of people in Faridpur, Dhaka, and Comilla were dependent in the system. When the dhows left for harvesting that year, the government did not obstruct them, but when they had finished their work within 2 months had loaded their boats with their share of harvest to feed their hungry families and pay off their debts, ready to go back to those who were waiting eagerly for their husbands, brothers, and fathers to return. Their paths were obstructed. They were They were told you can't take the rice back with you according to the government's directive. They were informed that they would have to surrender the rice, and failure to do so would mean in their boats and goods could be seized. Did they give up their share of rice so easy? Of course, in the end, they were allowed to leave after their share had been offloaded. As soon as I came to know about this, I protested strongly against the directive since it was not possible to accept it silently. I organized protest meetings and talked to the government officials, but to no avail. Meanwhile, I came to know Conrad Docker Mustak Ahmed had also organized protest meetings against the directive, but all the meetings we organized and resolution we adopted failed to dissuade the government, and yet these people were day laborers who weren't going to receive wages for the 2 months of hard work they put in, nor would they be able to pay off their debts to money-laundering debts they had occurred to meet their expenses for these months. In many cases, as soon as they came back, they had to sell their ancestral homes. I know hundreds of such instances. On the other hand, many people who had fleet boats in Faridpur, Dhaka, and Gumila districts and who would transport rice from surplus districts to their own had to shut down their carrying business. While those who did the actual work, sailing boats, became unemployed. Many of them ended up as rickshaw pullers or coolies, subsequently to make ends meet. When we all got intensively involved in the movement to oppose the government ban on transporting food grain, the government announced that it no longer had any objection to laborers moving from district to another to harvest rice, but they would not be able to move the paddy across district lines. They would have to deposit the rice they had received for their working the nearest government godowns. In exchange, government officials employed there would issue them a receipt. The doubles would then return to their own districts and submit their receipts to the godowns closer to their home. They would then get an equivalent amount of rice from the godown. The government was well aware if doubles were not allowed to move across district lines, in Khulna alone half the paddy would never get harvested. Issued it revised, ruining the subjects either in the late 1948 or in the early 1949. Unfortunately, half the dowels who followed the government directive were not given their own districts. They had been issued Neville printed receipts and had to accept handwriting bonds when they deposited the paddy they had helped harvest. When they showed the receipt to the godowns in their districts, they were turned back by those in charge of the godown and even shouted at. Only when they bribed the local officials did they receive rice as their share. The net result was the Dawals eventually lost everything they had. An unfortunate incident occurred around this time in Khulna. One night official intercepted Nearly 200 boats loaded with rice owned by Dawes and Faridpur district under cover of darkness. The Dawes ignored the government official orders, shouting God is great and Pakistan Zindabad. They sailed the boats loaded with rice. After they had travelled for 10 to 15 miles, a police team in a launch caught up with them and attempted to prevent them going on any further. The Dawes tried to thwart the police but failed. Finally, the police resorted to firing. The Dawes were forced to get down in a field by a river and offload their rice. Then they were chased away. However, the confiscated rice did not end up in a government godown because the next day it was swept away by heavy showers. As soon as I heard of this, I went to Khulna, where many boats have been seized along with their cargo of rice had not yet left the district. I led a procession of the Dawes whose boats and taken to the district magistrate's house. The district magistrate happened to be Professor Munir Chowdhury, father Mr. Abdul Halim Chowdhury. He lent me his ears, said he was helpless as government orders had to be followed, but he promised to telegram the higher ups to inform them about the situation. I returned to Faridpur with the Dawes and sent a telegram to the government. On my own, I asked the Dawes not to venture out again to harvest paddy till they had settled the issue with the government. Mr. Nazimuddin was then the highest ranking government official, having stepped into Jinnah's shoes to become Governor General after the latter had died in September 1948. This time another arbitrary measure was imposed, making everyone suffer as in a plague. The government opened what it called the Jinnah Fund. The government let it be known that everyone should contribute to according to his or her capacity. I don't know of anyone who hesitated to contribute to the fund. Those who had money were happy to make donations to it. Many poor people also gave what they could, but some overzealous government officials tried to force others to donate money to make the government happy. Some SDOS acted on the assumption that the more money they could make people to give the fund was, the faster they would be promoted. The situation was dismal. Mr. Nazimuddin was scheduled to visit Golpanj, the subdivisional. Decided there that since 600,000 people lived in Golpanj, if all of them paid a rupee each, it should be possible to raise 600,000 rupees for the event. Those who had guns would have to pay an additional amount. Businessmen, of course, would have to pay much more. People owning big boats would also have to contribute a hefty sum. He gave a ruling binding on all Union Board presidents that those who failed to pay plate would be punished. Everywhere people were concerned, local watchmen were employed for the purpose. They seized cows, cooking utensils, indeed everything of any value. It all amounted to a reign of terror. Mr. Still in the Muslim League, then others who had worked for the Golpanj Muslim League till 1947, however, had been bypassed and an ad hoc committee had been formed for the time being. This committee worked closely with the SDO. I returned from Khulna to Golpanj. At this time, the steamer did not land at Golpanj port in those days, and one had to get down at a small station called Haridspur that was 2 miles away from Golpanj, and then take a done.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I was unmuting myself. Thank you, Ahsan. I know I gave you a lot to read, so I want to say a big thank you to my young talents for the content I've been giving them. I've given them a lot of reading. I gave Ahsan 3 pages, and Mahmoud is going to storm through 5 pages. So I want to say a big thank you to both of you. So Ehsan, again, thank you very much for the engaging narration of the Unfinished Memoirs. I also want to say a big thank you to everyone who was commenting while Ehsan was reading. It's really encouraging to see that. So please do remember to like, comment, and share so we can really grow this platform and grow this show. So Ehsan, thank you very much for the reading. So in these paragraphs, we really witness why, community activism is so important. So there's talk of, ordinary people coming together against the establishment in the face of adversity, and why it's so important to look out for one another. So do you think it's important to have I'm just checking out, I'm going really slow. So do you think it's really important to have a community, and why is that?
Yes, it is important because it unites us. It makes us feel as though we are part of something greater.
Absolutely. And so Bongobondhuo, he speaks about like food scarcity and how people were hoarding food against others. And there's been distinct conversations in this year, and in the pandemic as well. There's been conversations about millionaires, billionaires, and key workers, and in today's society about how wealth is distributed and how we treat different people of different classes. So why do you think that there's tension between the different classes, for example, the working class, middle class, upper class, and how can we help break those class barriers?
Tension because all 3 classes have very different backgrounds. We can help break these barriers by being in a community and not worry about social status.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I agree with that. And I think, we see the same sort of problems come up again, especially if you study history. And what I noticed is that the conversations we're having now is what they were having in the 70s and the 80s. So I think it's really just less about, hoarding. As we've seen, there's been like criticism over, let's say, Jeff Bezos, who's the Amazon CEO, he's known for hoarding his profits and he doesn't really help charitably. And then obviously you've got other people of other different classes. So I think it's more realizing, I think especially in today's society, realizing that in this pandemic, for example, that everyone is kind of in the same sort of situation. So I really appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'm going to be going on to Mahnoun now, who is a returning guest. As I've already gave my thanks to Mahnoun, I'm going to say it again. He came in last minute and I'm very, very grateful. He's done that twice now. He's always came in when I needed him. So thank you very much, Mahnoun. I hope you're doing very well. Yeah, cheers. So, I've given you a lot to read, so I'm going to let you take it away. Thank you very much.
On 11 September 1948, when Muhammad Ali Jinnah died, Khawaja Nazimuddin had replaced him as Governor-General, and Mr. Nurul Amin had become the Prime Minister of East Bengal. At this point, a few MLAs had requested Mr. Sahrawadi to move to Dhaka and to become Prime Minister of East Bengal. He, however, did not agree to do so. In the Legislative Assembly, a new law was passed expelling him from it. I turned my attention now to the organizational matters of the East Pakistan Muslim Students League. We began to build our units in every school and college. Soon we were able to create effective organizations at the district level. The government student organization, on the other hand, existed only on paper. The Students' League took up the protest against the government's unfair decisions and began to criticize it. Since Pakistan had no opposing parties, the government had left a path of democracy and opted for dictatorship. The Prime Minister of the country, Mr. Liaquat Ali Khan, became the most powerful person in the country. He could not stand any criticism at all. There were a few left-leaning students who disliked the government, but the kind of ideas they tried to propagate offended the general students and the public. I used to tell them, while ordinary people still like to walk, you all tend to have your heads in the clouds and fly. They do not understand your language and will not accompany you in your flights. You should only give the public as much food for thought as they can digest. This made these communists speak out against me, but they failed to attract the students' world in any way. At about this time, Rajashri Government College students were beaten up. Most of them were members of the Student League. 21 students were expelled from the college, and the government had asked them to leave the Rajashri district. In many other districts, 2 students were being tortured and arrested. In January or February 1949, students were arrested in Dinajpur as well. Dabirul Islam was beaten up mercilessly inside this jail. In fact, it was so brutal, it was the punishment he received, that it would affect his health for the rest of his life. Students now made me the convener of a committee that was to organize a resistance day against repression. They even chose a date for this event. It was eventually observed in a district after district throughout East Pakistan. On the day that demands were made to free all students and political prisoners and to withdraw all punitive measures undertaken against students. This was the first time that a movement had been launched asking for all political prisoners to be released and protesting against repression. Nobody had dared launch such a movement before. In those days, whenever we wanted to hold a meeting or go out in a procession, some goons would be hired to beat us up and break up the meeting. On the Resistance Day against repression, they were imported into university campus. When I heard about this, I decided to hold a meeting in the evening. I told everyone present that we would have to resist any attempt to use the goons to attack us. We were supposed to hold the meeting in Amla Math that had been famous for political meetings. When the authorities prevented us from holding our meeting, we held it in the field that faced the university. I placed a special group of loyal volunteers near the university gate to obstruct the goons from attacking us and thwarting our meeting. The idea was to teach them a lesson through a 3-pronged attack so that they would refrain in the future from coming to Ramna to carry out such acts of disruption. What was surprising was that the government party would openly patronize such action and assist the thugs when they launched their attacks. Sometimes, when the students of Jagnata College, Mitford or medical school brought out processions headed for the university, they would be ambushed and beaten up by these goons. The Muslim League leaders were thereby creating an atmosphere of terror so that nobody would dare criticize the government. They seemed incapable of understanding that such tactics would one day boomerang on them. They were assuming that hired goons could stifle people's demands, that such measures have never succeeded and would not succeed in this case. It did not seem to have occurred to them. Around this time, Mr. Rafiqul Hussain of Krishnananga of Brahmanbaria subdivisions Nabinagar Thana organized a meeting in his locality. The idea was to raise funds so that Krishnananga High School could formally begin operations. Mr. N.M. Khan of the Pakistan Civil Service was invited as a chief guest with a view to raising funds. He was then the Director General of the Food Department. He had agreed to attend the event. The famous singers Abbasuddin Ahmed, Shohrab Hussain, and Bedaruddin Ahmed were supposed to perform on this occasion. I was also invited. Mr. N.M. Khan had become very popular in this part of the country for the good work he had done here before the independence as the SDO. When I reached the place, I saw that thousands of people had turned up hoping to listen to Mr. Khan and Mr. Abisuddin. The latter was immensely popular in villages all over Bengal. People used to go crazy when they heard him singing. His singing was very dear to their hearts. He was very much part of the land. It was unfortunate that a man of his stature had to work in the publicity department of the government. When the meeting began, I gave a speech at the invitation of Mr. Rafiqul Hussain, addressing Mr. Khan in my speech. I said, "You know the situation we are living in now. You have worked in this land for a long time and are Director General of the Food Department at the moment. Consider the condition of the dhows at this time. How will they survive? The government won't be able to feed them. If it is unable to help them, why is it depriving them of food?" I went on to highlight the difficulties of the dhows that the dhows were facing. I appealed to the public to help the school. Mr. Khan assured the meeting that he would do his utmost to help. After he left in the evening, the musical show began. Mr. Abbasuddin, Mr. Shohrab Hussain, and Mr. Beruddin sang on the occasion. The singing continued till late at night. Mr. Abbasuddin, as well as the rest of us, stayed the night at Mr. Rafiqul Hussain's house. Mr. Hussain's brothers were accomplished singers. Our companions, Hasnat and Barakat, were good singers too, and I was as fond of them as I was of my younger brother. They had, they had also spent time in jail with me. The next day, we left by boat for Ashuganj rail station, and the way our companions kept up their singing. I would consider a part of my life incomplete if I hadn't had the occasion to hear Mr. Abbasuddin sing Batiali songs as we crossed the river. When he was singing these songs as we crossed the river that day, it seemed to me that the gently lapping waves were entranced by his singing. His disciples Shohrab Hussain and Bedaruddin had managed to keep his style of singing alive to an extent. I had become Mr. Abbasuddin's devotee by this time. He told me at one point, "Mujib, there is a conspiracy afoot against the Bengali language. If Bengali isn't made a state language, Bengal's culture and civilization will be under threat. The songs I have appreciated so much today will all lose their charm and melody. Whatever happens, Bengali must be made the state language." I pledged to him I would try to make it our state language and have done my best to achieve this goal. We reached Dhaka by night. When we reached 150 Mughal Tuli, we heard that the lower class employees of the university were on strike and that students had joined them to show solidarity with their cause. I was aware that staff who were at the bottom of the pay scale had been petitioning for some time for their demands to be considered by the authorities. They had met me to acquaint me with their demands. Before the creation of Pakistan, the University of Dhaka was a residential university. Now it was the only university in the province. The number of students had increased substantially, but the numbers of employees hadn't increased correspondingly. They had to work throughout the day. Previously, they had been provided with accommodations, but now their flats were being taken away from them since the new capital of the province was short of residential space for government employees. They used to get uniforms at one time, but after Pakistan, this benefit too was withdrawn. On the other hand, the price of rice and the other essentials had risen. There was no job security. They would be hired and fired according to the whims of their employers. I told them to first get organized and then submit their list of demands. Otherwise, I pointed out, the authorities would not bother to listen to them at all. They formed a union then, and one of the students became its president. That was all that I knew about their situation. I was actually travelling from district to district then. Thus, when I found out, in Dhaka, that they had gone on strike, it was easy for me to see that they had taken the measure because the people in power had decided to ignore their demands. Nevertheless, they shouldn't have gone on strike so quickly, since they didn't have the funds to sustain a prolonged strike. The organization had been set up only a short while back. There was no way out now, since they had already gone on strike. When I went to the university in the morning, I found that the students were on strike too, to show their support for the staff. The workers had started to demonstrate, and the students had joined their procession. I took some student leaders along with me to the Vice-Chancellor and communicated to him the demand of the employees. The university authorities had by this time made up their mind to dismiss the striking workers. In the evening, I met him again, but this time I brought along with me the vice presidents of Fazlul Hall and Salimullah Muslimhu. I told him, please assure us that you will do your best to meet their demands by representing their case to the people in power and also seeing to it that no one will be sacked and no punitive measures will be taken against the striking workers. The negotiations went on for a long time. In the end, he agreed to our request. He told us, if you withdraw the strike tomorrow and resume work, nobody will be punished. And I will talk to the people in charge and try to persuade them to accept your legitimate demands. We returned to the university, trusting him to keep his word. It was 3 p.m. We negotiated with their representatives and then announced that student strike would be withdrawn from the next day. This was because most of the workers had decided to end the strike after receiving the Vice-Chancellor's assurance. Since many of the employees lived quite far away, I told everyone to spread the news of our decision to withdraw the strike everywhere as effectively as was possible. The next day, students went back to their classes and many employees resumed work. Those who came to join by 12 noon were allowed to do so, but those who came after this time were turned away. Many employees who commuted to work after Narayanganj fell in this latter category. In all, about 50% of employees who commuted to work from far-off places failed to come by the deadline, for they had to come to know about the withdrawal of the strike rather later. These people told my colleagues and me about their plight. They began to gather in one place. We were now in a difficult position, since it was our assurance that had made them withdraw the strike and join work. We asked them to wait. I went to meet the Vice-Chancellor at his residence once again. We asked him, what happened? He said, when I asked them to join today, I had made it clear that they should join by 11 a.m. And this meant that they would have to come no later than that time. We tried to convince him that he should be a little more flexible, but he refused to relent, having been pressurized by the government not to budge an inch. We said, are you going to take such drastic action just because of an hour or two? But nothing we said had any effect. We then pointed out, you should have specified that you wanted everyone to join by 11 a.m. All you had said was that people would have to join by today. At this point, he said he didn't want to talk to us anymore. We told him then that we would continue our strike. Students and employees held a joint meeting in the university. In it, I told those present what had happened in our discussion with the Vice-Chancellor. I also declared we would go on strike again from the next day, and that employees and students would continue their strike till the legitimate demands were met. We brought our procession and decided to continue to demonstrate in this manner once more the next day at 11 a.m. I had to take an active part in the procession then. I was finding it difficult to believe that an educationist and a top-ranking officer of the university would allow himself to be used by the government into making such double-edged statements. Shortly after we had finished our meeting that night, the university administration announced that the university would be closed sine die. Everybody was asked to vacate the halls in 24 hours. It was also announced that the employees who had demonstrated would be fired. I was in Salimullahu then. We organized a meeting immediately. We decided that we wouldn't leave the halls and made an announcement to that effect. The same decision was taken for Fazlul Haq Hall, and a similar announcement made. A committee was formed to raise funds for the employees who had gone on strike. We would go to the streets to raise money to help them. This was because most of the employees were paid only between 20 and 30 rupees. How would they look after their families now? We chose a few of them to raise funds for the affected families. By the next day, half the student population had left the halls of resistance. The day after, more students left for their homes. 3 days later, there were only 30 to 35 of us left in Salimullah Muslim Hall and 20 to 25 in Fazlul Haq Hall. The police had encircled the halls in the meantime. We decided to meet in a room in our hall. We realized that we wouldn't be able to keep the police away anymore. We decided to unanimously to leave the halls and to raise more money to help the affected employees, since without funds they would not be able to continue their strike. 4 days later, we were forced to leave the halls. We now worked on collecting funds to help the striking employees. 10 to 15 days later, we found out that one by one, employees were signing bonds and rejoining work. Within a month, most of them had resumed work. The strike was effectively over.
Thank you, Mahnoon, for that incredible narration. I know I gave you a lot to read, but I thought the passage was very, very rich in content and a lot of history as well. I thought that it was quite relevant to today. So the passage obviously talks about student activism. And as we're celebrating Victory Month, you know, student activism was essentially what started the fight for liberation. And I think it's a very real aspect of the history of Bangladesh. So, you know, our history is enriched in students, you know, revolting against repressive measures. And that's how, like, the fight for liberation, the domino effect started for us. So many freedom fighters, in fact, were students at the time. So they were university students. They were younger than me, or around my age, or actually effectively very young, so 16, 17, 18. So, you know, as the passage speaks about student activism, do you think that it's important to be engaged with social change at a young age? Or do you think it's beneficial or even detrimental to a young person's growth, and why?
Well, I think it's important that the youth takes part in social change. They can help a lot. Being part of the youth, I can see that we experience things in society, and our perspectives can help advance society. I think it's important that everyone can help. With things like racism, prejudice, equal rights, and more, it doesn't just affect the older generation, it also affects us all. This makes us want to like spring up and make a change. Look at Greta Thunberg, for example. She's an environmental activist who is internationally known for challenging world leaders to take immediate action against climate change. Thunberg initially gained notice for her youth, which is what we're talking about, and her straightforward speaking manner, both in public and to political leaders and assemblies, in which she criticizes world leaders for their failure and to take sufficient action to address the climate crisis. Her activism started after convincing her parents to adopt several lifestyle choices to reduce their own carbon footprint. This simple action, it started so much. Like a girls' grammar school near me, they protested for Black Lives Matter assembly to happen within the school. So the children of the grammar school, they wanted to feed the knowledge to everyone. So when you look at a few things like this, you'd realize that the youth has done so much. So I believe that they should engage with social change. And when you talk about is it detrimental or is it good? Well, to answer this question, we need to look at the pros and the cons. At such a young age, learning about the flaws of society can cause upset in children. But when you think about it, when they learn about all these world crises, they could, without blame, feel sad and shocked. However, there is a happiness in knowing that there is now security in knowing the truth. They can now also be filled with curiosity, happiness, and anger. In my opinion, this anger is good because it can be channeled towards knowing that they can fight for change and be a part of making a difference. So, if anything, supporting social change can help them develop more because they are learning to stand up for what is right. They are learning to be bold as well. They are learning to shine in confidence and to not shy away from the issues of today.
Yeah, I love that you brought up Greta Thunberg. I think she's such a great example. And also it reminded me of, so you mentioned just the school that you knew that protested for Black Lives Matter, in support of Black Lives Matter. You also remind me of when Greta Thunberg, I think she started this international movement. I don't know if it was like something called like School for Change. where like primary school kids and secondary school kids, they protested. They actually did walkouts of school in the name of climate change. And actually in Bangladesh there was a lot of primary and secondary school girls and boys who walked out, and they sort of like did picket fences around the school in sort of in the name of climate change, because Bangladesh is the ground zero for climate change. So I love that you said that, and I agree with sort of channeling that sort of anger, I think, into something that's more constructive. I think now I feel like maybe the younger generation feels a lot more powerful, especially if you see people like Greta Thunberg, or younger people who are becoming like faces of activism. I think you can channel that into feeling quite powerful rather than feeling quite depressed that you can't do anything, because you can. But I think, like you said, it's about like finding the right sort of role models and the people to, and the sort of the organizations and the movements to follow. So, like you said, social change doesn't just affect like the adult generation. It doesn't just affect us because we have to think about bills and you know everyday life, our workers' rights and things like that. So how do you think that bringing all the generations, how can they come together in encouraging young people to be engaged in creating positive change for the future? And do you actually think that's possible for the generations to come together?
Well, these children are next leaders and entrepreneurs and all of these things. So we need to all come together and put the effort in. So there are a few things we can do. For example, we can be a mentor. Like there are many times where you're like to yourself, if only I had someone to educate me. Why can't we become that person to that next generation? Why can't we be that person that they always needed to direct them? Our society will only flourish if we build upon each other, rather than going through the cycle of trial and error. There's absolutely no faster way to help the next generation grow and develop than to help them through their struggles. We need to be there for them. We also need to speak to them. You don't have to be a professional speaker to inspire, and you don't need to be an expert to educate. But wherever you are in your life right now, there's always going to be that one person that wants to be where you are. And my
Yeah,
three favorite parts about speaking personally are sharing the stories or examples to help them understand, make it concrete and actionable. If you can do these three things, the children will admire you. They will look up to you and say, I want to be like this person. This person is my role model. And that's what's really important. And another thing, in my opinion, books. I really like reading a lot. Books are really important for us. In my opinion, they are extremely important to us in our lives. When we read, not only are we improving memory and empathy, but research has shown that it makes us feel better and more positive as well. Science has shown that reading has some amazing health benefits, including helping with depression and cutting stress. If we can bring back reading with the youth, they will benefit from it very well in the short term and the long term. And there's one very important thing I want to bring up. I think that something that happens too often is that normally we try to push something like onto the youth. We don't actually just stop for a moment and ask, what do they want? What do they want to know? What do they want to be? Instead of trying to shove knowledge down their throats, why can't they talk to us? Why can't we
yeah,
get to know what they're passionate about to encourage and pursue those passions? Your simple encouragement can ignite a purpose. It can start a spark that turns them to the next, let's say, Elon Musk. In the process, you will learn to appreciate the world a children's through children's eyes, and you'll fall in love with the simple things again. Their
Mhm.
wonder can just be incredible if you just stop for a moment and actually just listen to them.
Yeah, that's so true. I really agree with that. Actually, I thought of two things as you were saying that I can actually relate to, and I hope that it helps people. So like you said, it really helps. That thing they said, oh, I wish someone had told me this. Someone older had told me this. So full disclosure, and like the story, like you said, sharing stories. So I share a lot of vulnerable stories about my upbringing and what I went through, just so in the event, and it has, in the event that it actually helps someone. So I had very difficult years in university with depression, and I remember once I recovered from that, I finally came clean to my parents about the depression and sort of the mental health issues I'd gone through at university. And my parents were open about what happened to them when they're in university. I'm not going to disclose that for the general audience, but I remember thinking when my mum and my dad were telling me the stories, like, I understand why they didn't, but I almost like there was a part of me going, and I've said this to them, that I wish that you had told me this when I was younger, just not because I needed to know about everything, not just because oh, I wish you'd known me. It's just if I had known like your stories when I was in that moment, I would have came to you and told you that I'm really struggling. So that's why I try and be as vulnerable as possible to people and be very open when I'm going through something. I tend to write about it a lot because I find that it really helps. And I publish it as well. So I've got a website and I publish it, and people do reach out and say that, oh, I'm going through this as well. So I really appreciate that. The second thing I wanted to talk to you about is you mentioned books, which is very appropriate for our show because we're reading a book. But yeah, I really appreciate what you said about books because, there's so many historical figures that have written memoirs, people that have passed. And I think that if you don't have like an active, so if there's anyone who's a parent and who has like a child that they want to really enrich and they want to encourage to take an active interest in our history or any history really, I think really open them up to books, especially if we don't have like an active role model. There's so many historical figures that have passed away, but they've written like 500 pages of everything that they've done, and that can be where you can find your inspiration and your action method, and you can follow what they've done and or adapt it to suit you. So I really appreciate you saying that. We are pressed for time, so I'm going to move on to Shukti. So I want to say a big thank you to Ihsan and Mahmoud for their incredible insights and just coming through with 110%. So thank you very much. So now I'm going to be moving on to Shukti Akhtar, who is correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're Oxford educated, so that's what I've been telling people. An Oxford educated teacher. She teaches secondary school students, and I was really, so we're doing a whole new format. We want to bring on people who are senior guests, but very like sort of closer to our age or close to the younger talents who have, that insight of growing up and, teaching younger people. So like social workers, community workers, teachers. And I really wanted to bring you on, because, you're brilliant. We've known each other from day one. We are family. Shukti is an incredibly supportive person, and also she's an incredible engaged teacher. She actually documents her teaching life on Instagram. So if anyone's on Instagram who wants to be a teacher, is interested, if there's any parents watching, please follow her. If I remember correctly, the @ is insidemy.ed. I believe that's your Instagram for your teaching life. And I'm also conscious that you have a very she's very busy, so I'm very grateful for her for coming in. So as a teacher, what has been in your experience in teaching, multicultural classes, people from different backgrounds, ethnicities, heritages, and has it really, helped you or not really been that helpful in seeing how we can support the younger generation?
So, hi everyone. So in terms of, teaching in these multicultural classes, it has absolutely helped me support the younger generation, just because, so the school I'm in currently, there's not actually many Bengali students, and I thought there would be, just because it is in East London, so that shows, my knowledge of geography is not that good. But why it is so helpful is because as a person, whatever environment I'm in, I personally just speak Bengali. I drop it in here and there all the time. So when I'm in classes with my students, I will speak to them in Bengali. So even, the students who aren't Bengali, they know what I'm saying. I've made sure they do, just because I refuse to not take that part away from myself, and I actively then encourage them to speak in their own languages. So, whether it's form time, whether it's actual lessons, just the little things like, when they're coming into the class and they're coming out of the class, I want them to speak in their own language, or just anything they want, just because I want to encourage that environment that it's okay, we don't have to be this like really posh, uptight kind of formal way of interaction all the time, and it is really important because, and then when it comes to team development, when I'm having lessons for my students, obviously I want to incorporate their multicultural backgrounds a bit more. So for example, if I'm doing something like a Christmas Carol, Child Dickens, a lot of my students don't even celebrate Christmas. So I'm thinking, as a scheme of work, how am I going to talk about Christmas for 2 months? I can't really. I've got to obviously think about their own celebrations, if they celebrate Eid, if they celebrate Diwali, all of those kind of things, and incorporating it into the scheme. So yeah, for me, it does really help on their languages and their own interests. There's 101 ways you can bring that in to the everyday classroom. So I just really encourage any other teachers who can speak another language or is coming from a different background to do that as much as possible.
Yeah, I love that you said that. So that actually reminded me of a time when I was in primary school. So I went to a Church of England school, so we used to go to church and everything like that. But there was one there was one year where I think we only studied it for a month, but we studied Islam for a month. And you don't know how excited I got. Like, I was like, I know this because this is my religion. I know this. And I got really excited. And it was really like, I can't tell you, I remember that memory very well. I was just lit up. And I really appreciate that you do that, because I know what you mean about Christmas Carol, Charles Dickens. Like, and we used to do, so I remember we used to do like Christmas concerts and Christmas plays and stuff like that, which were fun as a kid. They're fun when you're in primary school, but then as you get older, you're kind of like, it just don't really resonate. So as a teacher, you know, you have seen younger people in different lights to what their parents may have. I had a very good relationship with my teachers, I can honestly say, and I've paid, so with my book, you'll know I paid attribute to a lot of teachers that have helped me so much. So what advice would you give to, you know, parents who want to be more involved in their child's development as a teacher maybe, or, you know, you'll have seen them in like very high moments, very low moments. And do you think our heritage has any impact on how our children are raised? And is this good or bad for us?
So logistically, in terms of getting more involved in child's development, something quick wins you can do is just go on your school's website, find out platforms that you can engage with your child's learning. Because I think a lot of the time, the children might forget to actually tell you this is how you can check up on what I'm doing, what we're reading. But the kind of follow-on from that is don't have these conversations in a kind of punishment way. You know, it's not a kind of unchecked and it's going to be this, we don't do this, because then the child sees the education as a form of punishment and reward. And exactly as someone was saying before, you know, that creativity, that love of education kind of to dwindle by the time they come to year 11. So have those conversations with them constantly. Even if you don't know much about it, that's totally fine. Get them to teach you. That's the beautiful nature of it. Like my dad, for example, used to always ask me about English and Spanish. He doesn't know much at all, but he would ask me. He would go through so much of it. So fun. So by the time I got to year 11 and I was doing Spanish GCSE, he'd still have those similar conversations with me. So I never kind of depleted. So in terms of how our heritage has an impact on how our children are raised, 100%, I think it does. I think for me, it just gives this level of confidence that doesn't come from not knowing my heritage. So me growing up, I mean, you know this anyway. My dad used to take me to, you know, the Bengali singing lessons and the poems and all of that. When I was first going, I was like, oh, I don't like this. As soon as I grew up, and then I'm going to college, I'm going to university, I'm speaking to other people. Everyone is fascinated through like the little knowledge I have of Bangladesh, and to them it's so much. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that you didn't know who Gopal, you know, Robindranath Sangeet was. I didn't know you didn't know this. So it's just so much like it has such a positive impact, and then your children will realize it and be so much more appreciative when they're older as well. And as I said, it just gives you this level of confidence that you can use in the workplace, you can use at university. You just never kind of deplete in your pride in your heritage. And I think when you're young, it's still a bit hard, you know, especially with this society that we're living in. I know, you know, a lot of, you know, racism comes into play and things like that, especially depending on where you are. But it becomes your armor, it becomes your shield, I think, when you kind of grow up, you know. And I think it can be good for you, and those bad moments will kind of ride out, and I think the good will outweigh bad.
Yeah, I think also, you know, as you said that, I think a lot of times when, you know, when we're younger, we kind of, especially now, it's a very much, I want this, you know, we've got this whole, everything is like at your fingertips. So a lot of the times we don't exercise patience, you know, and so a lot, and especially when you're younger now, when I look back, I'm like, you know what, I have a lot of respect for like what my parents did for me, to sit your kid down every single day and teach them Bangla when you have to do a million things, but you're committed to it. And when I was younger, like, oh my God, this is so boring. Like, why do I have to learn Bangla? Why do I have to learn Bangla? And now I look back, I'm like, you know what? I have a lot of respect for that. It would have been like to have that sort of patience, like, you know, to have your end goal in mind of what you want your children not to be, but to learn. It's just coming from a place of learning. And like, for example, my brother, I would say my brother is definitely he's definitely a lot more engaged in our heritage at a younger age than I was. But I think that's because, now we're in a generation where it's really good to be different. I think being different is really celebrated. I think when I was younger, it wasn't like that. And I think now it's getting a lot more compressed. So people who are like, you know, when I was like 13 years old, I couldn't give I couldn't care less about being Bangladeshi. Whereas I feel like now that's different, where being different is really celebrated. And I think with, like you said, you know, not really a punishment reward kind of thing. Do it from a place of telling stories and being really. I love that your dad used to ask you about Spanish and stuff. We never really got that when I was younger, but I think it's because parents are just, they're confused and I think they get nervous about messing it up. But I think if it comes from a place of, I'm not doing this in a place of like, you have to learn this, you have to know this. It's more from a place of, I want you to do with whatever, like, you know, I'm going to give you the space, and the space can be different. Like Mahmoud said and you said about creativity, the space can be different. So like Bangla poems, Bangla songs, Bangla stories. I'm really into writing, so Bangla books would have been really beneficial when I'm younger. But that obviously changes and you learn that as you grow up. So I'm really grateful. I'm also very conscious of your time, so I want to say thank you so much for bringing in your insights about your teaching. I've never actually interviewed a teacher before, so I had no idea what it was like in the classroom. And I was so surprised when you said that you don't have a lot of Bangla students in your class.
No.
I thought that would have been because you teach in East London, so that's really interesting. Because I grew up, me and my sister in primary school, we were in the same class together. But then when it got to secondary school, I was like, me and her were the only brown kids in our school, out of 2,000. So you can imagine what that was like. So I'm really grateful for you for all the work that you do. Apart from being so supportive with me, I wish you please follow Shukti's like teaching life Instagram inside of my.ed, because she's just so lit up by teaching and it's really, really interesting. It's really insightful, and I'm not even interested in teaching, but I love following it. So please do. So I just want to say a big thank you again to everyone. I'm about to wrap up the show. But I want to say a big thank you to Ehsan, Mahnoun and Shukti for coming on. Today has actually been a very special episode, and Shukti wasn't here at the start. But we're honoring freedom fighters today. It's Victory Month, you know. It's 16th of December will be Victory Day, and I just want to say a big thank you to everyone coming on. This show is really important. It's growing. We're having incredible ideas come forward. I'm really excited to see where this show is going to go. And I want to say a big thank you again to Mukti Online Channel BB, who birthed this show, came to me with this idea and has given me I'm freezing. Giving me the platform to do what I can with the show and elevate it to the level that it's become. And also to Bongobondhuo Sangskritik Jote, London branch, who produced this. And also just a big thank you to everyone who liked, comment and shared. I'm sorry to say thank you during the show to a lot of people who are commenting during Mahnoun and Shukti, but we've obviously been on a tight deadline with the timing. And just to let everyone know that we are going on a winter break. We're coming up to Christmas. I know many of us don't celebrate Christmas, but it's like 3 weeks of holiday. So I'm looking forward to it. And so we're going to be taking on a winter break. We'll be coming back in the new year with more shows, more guests. And we've got incredible guests coming, like going to be chiming in from Bangladesh. We've got incredible university students, loads of people have been reaching out to us. So please do get in touch with Mukti Online Channel BD on Facebook. Nazrul Islam Okib is our coordinator, as well as Abdul Aziz Tukib, who is our coordinator as well. So a big thank you to both of them for growing this show, maintaining it, and just providing excellent support. Thank you to my guests. Thank you to everyone who's been chiming in on this wonderful Sunday afternoon. Have an incredible winter break. I hope you have an incredible time with your family. Eat, sleep, have an incredible rest in the holidays, and we will see you in the new year. Thank you very much to everyone, and enjoy your Sunday. Bye.
Bye.
Bye everyone.